He woke to the smell of smoke, herbs, and cold mountain air. For a heartbeat, he thought he was still dreaming, caught somewhere between the battlefield and the feast that followed. Then the weight of silence pressed in, thick, heavy, unnatural. This was not a warrior's barracks. The bed beneath him was carved from dark wood, smooth and warm, layered with woven furs that spoke of rank and tradition. His breath slowed as memory returned in fragments, drums, firelight, voices raised in victory. He turned his head. Beside him slept Elira, the chief's daughter. The world seemed to tilt. His muscles tightened as if preparing for an attack that would never come. Her hair spilled across the pillow like ink, her face calm, untouched by fear or regret. She looked nothing like the legends painted of her. No steel, no cruelty, only quiet strength. He sat up slowly, afraid even the sound of breathing might summon death. Outside the chamber, the fortress stirred. Footsteps echoed against stone. Somewhere far below, a horn sounded, low, long, and deliberate. Dawn. His heart began to pound. In Iron Valley, nothing happened at dawn without purpose. He pulled on his tunic, hands unsteady, eyes darting to the door. Every warrior in the valley knew the law. To wake beside the chief's daughter was not a mistake to be laughed away. It was a declaration written by fate itself. Elira stirred. Her eyes opened, sharp and clear, meeting his without surprise. There was no fear in them, only understanding. She sat up, the furs slipping from her shoulders, and the weight of the moment settled between them like an unsheathed blade. "They will already know," she said softly. He swallowed. "I don't remember crossing this line." "No one does," she replied. "That is why it is dangerous." Another horn echoed, closer now. Voices rose in the courtyard below, deep and disciplined. Warriors gathering. He moved to the narrow window and looked down. Armor caught the first light of morning. Row after row, numbers too great to count at a glance. They stood in silence, waiting. Not to attack, to witness. Behind him, Elira rose and joined him. "When the sun fully rises," she said, "my father will come." "And then?" he asked. She met his gaze. "Then the valley will decide whether you leave this place as my husband, or not at all." The sky outside burned with the first edge of gold, and somewhere deep in the stone halls drums began to beat. By the time the sun cleared the eastern ridge, the lower court of the fortress was full. Stone walls rose like cliffs around the gathering, trapping the sound of drums that beat slow and heavy, each strike echoing through bone and breath. He stood alone at the center, boots planted on sand darkened by old battles, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes press against his back. 321 warriors formed perfect lines before him, armor dull with age and use, spears grounded in silence. None spoke, none needed to. Above them all, on the high stone platform, stood Chief Reagan. The chief's presence did not demand attention, it consumed it. His hair was bound with iron rings, his cloak stitched with the marks of conquered clans. When his gaze fell on the young warrior below, it felt less like judgment and more like being measured by the land itself. "You woke where no man wakes by accident," the chief said, his voice carrying easily across the court. "Not as a guest, not as a prisoner, but beside my daughter." The words settled like dust after a collapse. He forced himself to lift his head. "I did not seek dishonor." A low murmur rippled through the ranks, quickly silenced by a raised hand from the chief. "Intent matters little in Iron Valley," Reagan replied. "Our laws were written to survive chaos, not feelings." Elira stepped forward then, her footsteps steady against the stone. She did not stand beside him, nor behind her father, but between them, exactly where no one could ignore her. "The night was not stolen," she said, "nor forced. If blame must be carried, I will carry it as well." For the first time, something shifted in the chief's expression, not softness but recognition. He studied her, then returned his gaze to the warrior. "The law offers one path," he said. "At sunrise you are nothing. By sunset you may be bound to this valley forever." The drums stopped. "The trials will begin now." A horn sounded, sharp and final. Two warriors approached, removing his weapons and casting them aside. He was led across the court, past the silent ranks, toward the first trial ground. Heat rose from the sand, already promising pain. He clenched his fists, knowing this was no test of strength alone. It was a test of will, of whether he would break under the eyes of those who wanted him to fail. Behind him, Alira watched without calling out, her face calm, her faith unspoken but heavy. As the warriors formed a circle around the trial ground, Chief Reagan spoke one final time. "Survive," he said, "and the valley will call you one of its own." The drums began again, louder now, and the first trial was set in motion. The sun had begun its slow descent when the final drumbeat faded into silence. Dust hung in the air, glowing faintly in the light, and the court looked as though the earth itself had been torn open and stitched back together. He stood at the center of it all, breathing hard, his body marked by exhaustion rather than defeat. Each trial had taken something from him, strength, balance, certainty, but none had taken his resolve. The warriors watched closely now. Where there had once been cold curiosity, there was attention sharpened by respect. 321 of them stood in disciplined ranks, shields resting at their sides, eyes tracking every movement he made. They were no longer waiting for him to fall. They were waiting to see what kind of man remained. A final horn sounded, long and low. Chief Reagan descended from the stone platform, his steps unhurried, deliberate. The crowd parted as he crossed the court, the sound of his boots against stone, louder than any cheer could have been. He stopped a short distance away and studied the man before him, bloodied, unbowed, still standing. "You were tested by pain," the chief said, "by fear, by the knowledge that every breath might be your last." He paused, letting the words settle. "You did not turn away." Silence followed, deep and absolute. One by one the warriors moved. Spears were lifted, not in threat, but in recognition, and then lowered together, their metal tips touching the ground in a single, thunderous sound. The gesture rippled through the court like a wave. Acceptance, not celebration, but something older and stronger. Alira stepped forward from the edge of the gathering. The dust clung to her garments, her hair bound back in the style of the valley. She met his eyes, and for the first time that day, a small smile broke through her composure. Not relief, but certainty. Chief Reagan turned to her briefly, then back to him. "The valley does not choose lightly," he said, "but it has chosen." He raised his voice so all could hear. "At dusk the banners will rise. The rites will be prepared. This union will be witnessed by warriors and ancestors alike." Beyond the fortress walls, the wind shifted. Far-off shadows moved along the ridgelines, unseen by most but not unnoticed. Change had been set in motion, and not every clan would welcome it. As the sun slipped closer to the mountains, white cloth was carried into the court, lifted high against the darkening sky. The warriors remained at their posts, waiting not just for a wedding, but for whatever storm would follow a dawn-born fate.